are perceived to be friendly with the police. And there's been a fear in this country of taking on far-right terrorism for more than a decade. There's been a fear of addressing that there is a form of domestic terrorism in this country that involves radical right-leaning individuals. And I hope that that fear goes away. I hope no one's afraid anymore to take on this threat here at home.
Former Police Chief Charles Ramsey, Brian Stelter, appreciate it. The U.S. Capitol attack exposing major security concerns weeks before presidential inauguration that Trump has told his supporters is illegal, which is most certainly is not. It's all a lot to take in. I'm joined by presidential historian Doris Kearns Goodwin. It is good to have you here in these very difficult days. I just want to get your reaction, just as you know, things played out on Wednesday, what we all saw. How do you see this? How can you put it in perspective?
Well, I try to think about what it's going to be like when people 100 years from now look at that event on January 6th. And I think, first of all, whatever is written about it, it will start with the election, and the election that President Trump did not concede, was not willing to accept was real, and then fabricated to millions of people the idea that it was stolen, created the atmosphere that allowed those people to come to Washington under his incitement and attack the Capitol. So, and in the meantime, I think 100 years from now, people will be saying, we were suffering one of the worst crises we'd ever been through with the virus and the economic catastrophe, and almost not a word was said about it. And this was what we were talking about, and this is what he fostered upon us. I hope that people 100 years from now will be stunned that this happened, and it won't be something that they're going to see happening again and again. They'll think, how in the world did this happen to us at this time in history?
The idea that the President of the United States is right now like running around trying to bogart other people's Twitter accounts so that he can tweet is just ridiculous. I mean, he hasn't, he's not doing anything about coronavirus, but he's just, trying to find Twitter accounts that he can ghost. Is there anything that compares to this in the history of the nation? You would reference the famous Kane attack that took place prior to the Civil War in the halls of Congress. Can you explain what happened and why you think it resonates today?
Yeah, I think there really is a sense of looking at that attack now and figuring out what happened and thinking about what we can do now to make that not happen.
It was Charles Sumner who got attacked, right?
Charles Sumner, who's an anti-slavery senator in Massachusetts, is seated at his desk in the Senate chamber. A representative from South Carolina, Preston Brooks, comes into the Senate chamber, and he takes his cane and he hits Sumner on the head so hard as Sumner's trying to get up that he falls into unconsciousness. He's bleeding. He has to be carried out. He cannot even get back to the Senate for 3 years. So badly was he injured. But that attack finally mobilized even more people in the North to mass rallies. It's partly responsible for creating the dawn of the Republican Party, which had already been formed, but moderates and conservatives began to form into the Republican Party. But meanwhile, the really scary thing is that in the South, just as Sumner was a hero in the North, Preston Brooks becomes a hero in the South. And the governor presents him of South Carolina with a golden or silver goblet and a cane. All sorts of people are sporting canes and wanting to go after other people. So I think the real lesson for us, and then that's one of the incidents that leads to the Civil War, is it seems inevitable to us now that Civil War took place. Right now, we worry about what is going to be the end of our story, but it doesn't have to end this way. And maybe there's some hope in the idea that Republicans, even if they were in the dawn of their party back then, are now at a point of changing their party, of separating themselves from Trump and creating a new form of the Republican Party. We've seen massive numbers of people voting in South Carolina, voting in the November election. If people can take hold of this and realize this is our story, we have to tell it so it doesn't end up the way it did in the Civil War, then something will be learned. That's what history does. It gives us solace and hope if we look back at the past and we make it different in the present.
There is this strain throughout American history, though, of violence and upheaval, and it's not something we like to think about. It's not something we like to view as part of our history.
And it's very important that we understand that strain, because I think that's part of the problem sometime. And that's what our educational system is getting better at right now, is to make us understand how we had to go through various times, very difficult times, to come out looking better. I mean, I keep going back in a positive way. When you think about how public consciousness was shifted with the Selma demonstration, there you had a strain of that violence. Look at what those Alabama state troopers did to the peaceful protesters on that bridge at Pettus Bridge. And yet somehow when people saw that, just as people have now seen this attack in the Senate, just as they saw Charles Sumner. There's something about visual imagery like that, or something so dramatic, it shifted public consciousness, and that Voting Rights Act was passed. So I think we just have to hope that somehow public sentiment can change through this. That's what old Abe Lincoln said. With public sentiment, anything is possible. Without it, nothing is possible. And he doesn't mean just public opinion. He meant when you suddenly get the country to realize something is against the ideals that we allow ourselves to believe are us, and then they have to change something and make it different. And hopefully we're at that turning point now. That's the only way we can go forward, is for people to realize something has to change from where we've been in these last 4 years.
Yeah. Doris Goodwin, it's always a pleasure to talk to you, and especially in a difficult time, to get some perspective. Thank you.
You're very welcome. So glad to be with you.
You take care. Last night, we pointed out some in Congress and former White House staffers who are now distancing themselves from the president that they'd enabled, cabinet members suddenly jumping from the sinking ship. While we were doing that, over on Fox News last night, Tucker Carlson and then Sean Hannity were downplaying the severity of the attack on the Capitol, saying essentially it wasn't insurrection, just a peaceful protest, got out of hand. They also both devoted segments to what they would like you to believe is the real outrage about the attack on the Capitol, me. And they're twisting something I said about the people who perpetrated the attack.
According to Anderson, the real horror from yesterday's chaos is that some of the pro-Trump protesters will go back and celebrate at an Olive Garden and spend the night at a Holiday Inn. Oh, the thought. Anderson Cooper thinks that accusing someone of eating at an Olive Garden or staying at a Holiday Inn is a low insult.
Now, look, I know they're in a jam. Those guys have backed the president more than anyone. Hannity's multi-million-dollar media empire of TV and radio and books is all based on the support of Trump supporters. So I get that they need to play down what we all witnessed at the Capitol. I get it. They need to change the subject. They need to divert attention. And I guess I gave them an easy opening to twist my words. I should have been more clear with something I said in the immediate moments after the attack, as people who'd broken into the Capitol were simply being allowed to leave, it seemed, to just walk away, celebrating, in fact, the criminal act that they had taken part in. I was trying to remark about the seeming casualness of the behavior that we were all witnessing at that moment after the attack, the high-fiving, the laughing, the celebratory atmosphere, as if they'd actually accomplished something other than just disgraceful mayhem. I said they should be ashamed of what they did, and I believe that. And I was trying to say, and perhaps didn't do a good job of it, that they were just going to go back to their lives that day as though they were patriots. They're going to go back to hotels and have a drink, have some dinner. I named the 2 hotels that I could think of in the Capitol Hill in that moment, in the mall area. I named the Olive Garden as a restaurant they might eat at, normal places, as if this was just a normal day. I was actually thinking of another restaurant in that area with the name Olive in it, but in the moment, my brain froze. I couldn't remember the exact name. I said the Olive Garden. It turns out the nearest one is in Maryland. Anyway, now Hannity and Carlson are trying to rile up their viewers and distract them by pretending I was somehow dissing Olive Garden or those hotels, implying I'm too fancy for those establishments. Because of my mom's last name, I somehow look down on those establishments. And it genuinely makes me sad to think people would believe that. And I've been kind of sad about it all day. That is not what I was doing. I wasn't dissing a restaurant. I was dissing criminality and the ability of some who took part to just go back to their routines seemingly without any sense of shame and being allowed to just walk away from a crime scene. A shocking crime was committed, an assault on our democracy, an assault many otherwise law-abiding citizens had actually been fooled into taking part in by our president, who lied to them about widespread election fraud that did not occur. And those lies were amplified by Fox News, and yes, by Tucker Carlson and Sean Hannity. And now they're trying to minimize it and divert attention away from it. The Washington Post quotes Hannity as saying, "I'd like to know who the agitators were." The biggest agitator is your buddy, the president. You probably have his number on your cell phone. Tucker Carlson said, "We may never know the truth here. I keep seeing all these kind of accounts of who they were and what their motives might have been." That's like people saying, "Well, I keep seeing all these reports about election fraud, so we got to act on it and have this commission and really investigate it." What happened at the Capitol should be a moment for all of us to reflect on our own words and our actions, myself included, and how we can all do better to bring this country back together. Is this who we really want to be? I hope the folks at Fox might do some reflecting as well, instead of just the usual games of diversion and division. Just for the record, I like the Olive Garden. I like the artichoke dip, even though it has spinach in it, which I hate. Yes, I know, it's an appetizer with breadsticks. It's like a whole meal. On my New Year's Eve broadcast a few years ago, we even broadcast repeatedly from the Olive Garden, and I repeatedly praised the restaurant. Over the years, I've also publicly praised Orange Chicken at Panda Express, turkey with stuffing at Boston Market, and McDonald's Big Macs. I'm sure the folks at Fox will continue to spin this, but this is just a diversion from a crime that was committed, a crime in which people died. A police officer died. This is not a time for stupid cable news fights. It's a time for mourning the loss of life. And let's hope it's time for a new morning in America. We have more important news ahead. The daily death toll due to the coronavirus reached a new high last night with 4,112, a number that could be surpassed tonight. Nowhere right now is the virus hitting harder than in California. What it looks like inside one hospital there that's completely overwhelmed but is desperately trying to save lives. We'll be right back.